I think I talked before about how I actually really liked law school and studying justice. And one of the reasons is that justice can take so many different forms. Justice can be righteous. It can be elusive. Justice can be blind. Justice can be harsh. But justice also can be karmic. And the indictment that was handed down today by a grand jury in Maryland arguably is all of those things, but for sure it is karmic. It is a pure and expressive representative expression of what karmic justice is. And that's because the longtime warmonger, sociopath, and high-level government official John Bolton, who served as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations under the Bush-Cheney administration as national security advisor before President Trump fired him, was indicted today on 18 felony counts of mishandling classified information. And what makes this karmic justice, among so many other things, not just the fact that John Bolton long deserves punishment for the pain and suffering and bloodshed he has brought to this world and continues to attempt to bring, but also the fact that he has spent his whole career urging that others who mishandle classified information or cause the leak of sensitive information, which he's accused of doing, either spend life in prison or actually be hanged by an oak tree as traitors. And he obviously has no intention of applying that same standard to himself. First of all, here's the news article from the New York Times just a little bit ago, just a couple hours before we went on air. John Bolton is indicted over his handling of classified information. Quote, John R. Bolton, the national security hawk and former advisor to President Trump, who became one of his most outspoken critics, was indicted by a federal grand jury in Maryland on Thursday on charges of mishandling classified information. An 18-count indictment accused Mr. Bolton of sending diary notes about his day-to-day activities as Mr. Trump's national security advisor in 2018 and 2019. Many of those notes included, quote, national defense information, including details that were classified as top secret, the indictment charged. While Mr. Bolton is part of a string of perceived enemies of the president to become prosecutorial targets, and this is the crucial part, the federal investigation into him gained momentum during the Biden administration, when U.S. intelligence agencies gathered what former officials have described as troubling evidence. Let me just stop there because John Bolton now has a lot of friends inside the media. He's particularly beloved at CNN. He constantly is on Caitlin Collins' show where he's treated as some sort of wise statesman of foreign policy. She absolutely adores him. She never questions a single utterance of his. She treats it like foreign policy gospel. And the reason is very obvious. The sole reason is because he goes on and constantly bashes Donald Trump. And so he went from one of the most hated figures in all of the political class to someone who's now utterly beloved, not just on CNN, but by the larger liberal resistance movement as somebody who condemns Donald Trump. As I've said before, and I don't mean this hyperbolically, I mean this very literally. If Adolf Hitler were reincarnated and he came back and he started bashing Trump, saying that Trump was a Russian agent, which Hitler, would be like what to do. Hitler always had a lot of animosity toward Russia. Probably would accuse him of being a Russian agent, accuse him of being corrupt, not knowing how to handle foreign policy. I really think that MSNBC would give Hitler his own show. It'd be called like the Hitler Hour or something like that, very alliterative. And he'd be on at like 4 p.m., 4 to 5, the 4 to 5 hour, and he would have like Democratic Party officials, senators, and members of Congress and pundits on who would, treat him very cordially, even affectionately, because that's all it takes. John Bolton is one of the most sociopathic warmongers ever to serve in the highest levels of government. And he's always on CNN. And Caitlin Collins already is publishing his denials without any kind of pushback of any kind. And so, the narrative is obviously going to emerge that John Bolton is a victim of Donald Trump's administration and his vindictive attempt to prosecute his political enemies. But note here that the prosecution actually, and even the New York Times is emphasizing this, it gained momentum during the Biden administration because a lot of intel officials under the Biden administration had information that they described as very troubling behavior when it came to his mishandling of classified information with which he's now charged. This isn't something that Trump DOJ concocted. It's not something they invented. You can make the case that there have been other prosecutions that seem vindictive in nature, although they could still be true. But this went through the normal process. Here's the New York Times. The emails in question, according to the sources, were sent by Mr. Bolton and included information that appeared to derive from classified documents he had seen while he was the national security advisor under Mr. Trump. Mr. Bolton apparently sent the messages to people close to him, who were helping him gather material that he would use in his 2020 book, his memoir, The Room Where It Happened. So let me just be clear here. So John Bolton was sitting inside the White House. And as we now know from many different cases, if you're someone who's authorized to handle top secret documents, and obviously if you're the national security advisor to the president, you're working in the West Wing right beside the president, there are few people on the planet who have more unfettered access to top secret information than you as the national security advisor. You obviously need that to advise the president. And John Bolton, while he was working in the White House, was planning on writing a book about his time in the White House, which national security officials can do, but they have to leave the government. They can't take classified information with them, and they have to submit their book for pre-publication review to make sure there's no classified material in there. John Bolton the whole time was pilfering classified information. He was writing himself notes and writing notes to two people close to him who are described as person one, person two in the indictment, neither of whom have classified clearance, so they're not authorized to receive classified information. And it's widely speculated that those are his wife and daughter, who he was pilfering top secret documents and other information from the White House, where he was reading top secret documents containing top secret information, sending them these materials over AOL and Google. In other words, not using the highly secured government channels for top secret information. And as a result, according to not just the indictment, but to the US government under Biden, the Iranians, Iranian intelligence agencies, Iranian hackers were able to obtain these materials, not from hacking into the US government servers, which are highly secured, but instead hacking into John Bolton's home email server or home email address, where they found top secret material because John Bolton illegally and recklessly put it there. That's the case against him. Now, in a separate part of the reporting, the New York Times, this is from the reporter Glenn Thrush, and I can't stress enough how significant it is that it's coming from the New York Times, which obviously always wants to claim that Donald Trump's prosecution is violating norms, that it's driven by vindictive motives. But in this case, listen to what they're saying. What makes the John Bolton indictment so unusual in the Trump era is that it is so usual. The prosecution followed normal departmental channels without firing strong-arm orders from the White House or forced transfers. It just went through the standard DOJ prosecutorial machinery without any pressure from the White House. Kelly O'Haines, the U.S. Attorney of Maryland, signed off on the charges in conjunction with the department's National Security Division. In the cases of Jim Comey and Letitia James, who were indicted, where Trump had to install a hand-picked prosecutor to get the charges he demanded, said the New York Times. In this case, that didn't happen. It was just the U.S. Attorney, confirmed by the Senate for Maryland, as well as the National Security Division of the DOJ that prosecutes cases like this all the time. And that's where this case emerged from the normal process. And again, it picked up momentum in the Joe Biden era. Let's go back to this indictment, please. So here's the indictment itself. And I think that allegations here are extremely important. So it's filed, there you see it, in the District of Maryland in the U.S. District Court. And I believe it has been assigned to, I'm not sure if the judge has been assigned yet. We'll check that. But this is the indictment. The indictment was handed down by a grand jury. So it's a grand jury of his peers. They returned an indictment on all 18 felony counts that were sought against John Bolton. It's the case is called now United States of America versus John Robert Bolton II. And here are a couple of crucial passages from the indictment. After John Bolton, and remember, an indictment is an allegation. It's a document that is a set of allegations, prosecutorial allegations, that were presented by a prosecutor without any defense lawyer present to question it or to refute it, which is why it's considered easy to get a grand jury indictment, but it's not automatic. Grand jury indictments are rejected often. Not often, but they do happen. And they should be taken as allegations, but the fact that it went through so many different levels of prosecutorial scrutiny and then got approved by the grand jury gives it some level of credence. And again, the fact that it was out there for years, that it went through the Biden machinery where it picked up a lot of momentum, even though John Bolton was a vociferous critic of Donald Trump, they had no reason to look at John Bolton as a political enemy of the Biden administration. Quite the contrary. They saw him as a political ally, and yet that's where this investigation was being so aggressively pursued. And here's part of the indictment. Maybe we could put that on the screen. After John Bolton's time as National Security Advisor ended on September 10, 2019, Bolton's personal residence was not authorized to store classified information in physical or electronic format. And yet here's what he did while he was in the White House. On or about April 8, 2018, the day before John Bolton officially began his duties as National Security Advisor, Individual 1, which I believe is his wife, created a group chat with Bolton, and Individual 2, which I believe is his daughter, on a non-governmental messaging app. Individual 2 asked the group, "What are we using now? The encryption?" To which Individual 1 responded, "Yep, why not?" Bolton then responded, "For diary in the future." So they created a family group chat for John Bolton to send his daily diary to while he was working at the highest levels of national security apparatus inside the government, advising Donald Trump, working with the most sensitive secrets. The indictment goes on. On or about April 22nd, 2018, Bolton sent Individuals 1 and 2, people who do not have authorized clearance, via the non-governmental messaging app, a 25-page document which described information that Bolton learned while National Security Advisor. On or about April 22nd, 2018, Individual 2 sent Bolton and Individual 1 a message that stated, quote, "Diary finished." Individual 1 also asked Individual 2 whether Individual 2 was, quote, "going to call tonight," to which Individual 2 responded, "Am I supposed to?" Individual 1 then wrote, "Diaries take time to write, but phone conversations take less time." On or about July 15, 2018, Individual 2 sent Bolton and Individual 1 a message that stated, quote, "Do we get a diary today?" Individual 1 responded, "Don't think he can do it on this trip." Bolton later added, "Too much going on. I've done much of Friday in London because I didn't take many notes and wanted to get it down before I forgot." On or about July 23, 2018, Bolton sent Individuals 1 and 2 a message that stated, "More stuff coming." A few minutes later, Bolton sent Individuals 1 and 2 a 24-page document which described information that Bolton learned while National Security Advisor. Less than 3 hours later, Bolton sent Individuals 1 and 2 a follow-up message that stated, none of which we talk about." In response, Individual 1 sent a message that stated, "Shh." They're like, playing games like, "Shh, this is top secret," which it was. Individual 2 then sent a message that stated, quote, "The only interesting thing is what a certain senior U.S. government official might have said from a foreign language interpreter, which you didn't tell us." Approximately 2 minutes later, Individual 1 sent a message in response that stated, "More to come with cloak and dagger," or something, so he says. Then, on or about September 23rd, 2018, Bolton sent Individuals 1 and 2 a 10-page document which contained information that Bolton learned while National Security Advisor, including information up to the top secret SCI level. Now, that isn't just classified information. That is the highest level, the most sensitive classified information. There's one higher level of classified information, things for like the nuclear codes, but top secret SCI for these purposes, for a leak case, is about as serious as it gets. And he's just sending it over non-governmental apps to his wife and daughter for purposes of compiling a book. And they know it's wrong. They're joking amongst themselves about how it's secret and cloak and dagger. And then the indictment says this: at some point between when Bolton left government service in September 2019 and July 2021, a cyber actor believed to be associated with the Islamic Republic of Iran hacked Bolton's personal email account and gained unauthorized access to the classified and national defense information in that account, which Bolton had previously emailed to Individuals 1 and 2 while he was the National Security Advisor. A representative for Bolton then notified the U.S. government of the hack, but did not tell the U.S. government that the account contained national defense information, including classified information, that Bolton had placed in the account from his time as National Security Advisor, nor did Bolton's representative tell the government that Bolton had shared some of that national security information, including classified information, with Individuals 1 and 2 via personal email and a non-governmental messaging app. So this is the basic gist of the indictment, which is that it isn't just that he recklessly handled classified information. It's not just that he sent classified information on purpose, top secret information, to people not authorized to receive it. It's that his reckless mishandling of classified information, his illegal mishandling of classified information, resulted in the acquisition of that information by intelligence agencies and hackers associated with Iran. Now, I personally would not consider this case to be all that serious, but I just want it to be clear that John Bolton has looked at cases like this, and even cases more mild, and said, people who do this are the most despicable people. They deserve life in prison, if not the death penalty, as we're about to show you in just a few minutes. He said that repeatedly about numerous cases. And obviously, you can just imagine that if John Bolton went on CNN or whatever network that has him, it's usually CNN, and he was there to talk about somebody who leaked classified information at a top secret level and that caused Iran to obtain it. Imagine the level of imprisonment, if not worse, that John Bolton would be demanding that such people receive. And yet now that John Bolton himself is being charged with the crimes that he has spent his entire life castigating other people in the most extreme ways, now that he's charged with exactly those crimes, do you think he's saying, I deserve life imprisonment, I'm a traitor, I should be hanged from an oak tree the way he did for other people who leaked for much more benevolent purposes, not for compiling books and writing books to make them look good or for self-aggrandizement or for profit, but to inform the public? You think John Bolton is saying that? No, he's not. He's now whining that he's the victim. This is a statement that was given to his colleague, Caitlin Collins at CNN. She passed it along without even a hint of disagreement or noting what in the statement that is tenuous at best, if not false. This is part of what he said, quote, "For 4 decades, I have devoted my life to America's foreign policy and national security." He's actually devoted his life to demanding that other people go fight in wars so that he can feel strong and powerful. He's never gotten near a war, never fought in a war. He just wants to send other Americans to fight and die in as many as he can think of. And then he says, I would never compromise these goals. In 4 years of the prior administration, after 3 reviews, no charges were ever filed. Then came Trump 2, who embodies what Joseph Stalin's head of secret police once said. You show me the man and I'll show you the crime. So of course he's whining, he's the victim. But as even the New York Times says, it's very difficult to maintain that this is some kind of politicized witch hunt against a government critic, given that the Biden administration thought that this case was very serious. So did the intel agencies under Joe Biden. And this isn't a case where Donald Trump went to Truth Social and said, Pam, indict John Bolton the way he did with Jim Comey and Letitia James. This went through the normal standard DOJ process that everybody always feigns such respect for. Oh, the prosecutor brought it. It's a serious national security leak case. In every other instance, that's what you would be hearing. Here, though, you're going to see the media rising in defense of John Bolton for no reason other than the fact that he is a critic of Donald Trump. And like I said, that is enough and nothing else, no matter what else is true about you, to get you into good standing inside Washington establishment, media, and politics circles. Needless to say, ground zero for defending John Bolton is found at that Blue Sky app, which is where all the liberals and leftists went once they realized that Twitter would no longer be a venue that would censor all their political enemies, and they went to that other place that's dying for that reason. But you go there and they're all like, John Brennan is the victim of government prosecution. John Brennan, that's who they're defending. Here's what John Brennan had to say in the past when other people were charged. I don't know why I keep saying John Brennan. I mean John Bolton. We're going to get John Brennan in a second. He's also been indicted. But here's what John Bolton had to say in other cases where people were charged with causing the leak of classified information. Here on December 18, 2013, I remember this actually. Former U.S. envoy, which is John Bolton, says Edward Snowden should be hanged as a traitor. Quote, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, has said whistleblower Edward Snowden should be hanged for treason. Quote, my view is that Snowden committed treason. He ought to be convicted of that. And then he went on Fox News right around the same time, and he was asked about Edward Snowden and people arguing that Snowden was a noble whistleblower, that unlike Bolton, who leaked classified information for profit or write a book for his own self-aggrandizement, Snowden did it simply because he wanted other people to know about the crimes the government was committing and how they were spying on Americans with no warrants. And unlike Bolton, who just sent it over reckless apps like AOL to his wife and daughter, Snowden used the most sophisticated encryption devices, demanded that the journalists whom he chose to work with, including myself, install and master these extreme multi-level encryption devices that he learned at the NSA and at the CIA to protect the sanctity of that information. To this date, nobody has ever suggested that Snowden's handling of that information enabled any other government or any other intelligence agency to hack it or to obtain it, unlike with what happened with John Bolton. John Bolton's case was way worse, both in terms of the motive which is purely selfish and self-interested. But also, Snowden, the only materials that saw the light of day that Edward Snowden took were materials that not just the journalists, but the editors we work with around the world, newspapers, magazines, deemed to be in the public interest. It went through huge amounts of multi-level vetting. And he kept it all secure, whereas John Bolton just caused it to leak to Iran because he was so desperate to get his book deal done, where he could bash Trump and make money and rejuvenate or rehabilitate his reputation in the eyes of the CNNs and Caitlin Collins of the world. So here's what he said about Edward Snowden, infinitely his superior in terms of his actions, when he went on Fox News.
I think it's a big mistake. I have no idea. I mean, my view is that Snowden committed treason. He ought to be convicted of that, and then he ought to swing from a tall oak tree.
He ought to swing from a tall oak tree, said John Bolton about Edward Snowden. Now, Edward Snowden was never charged with treason. He was charged under the Espionage Act. Of course, he hasn't been prosecuted for it because he sought and obtained asylum in Russia. But John Bolton didn't just want Edward Snowden in prison. He wanted him murdered. He wanted him executed, to hang from an oak tree. Here's what John Bolton had to say about Julian Assange. Let me just say about Julian Assange. Unlike John Bolton, who, as a high-level government official, took an oath to protect classified information, to handle classified information only in accordance with the law, not to hand it to his wife or daughter, not to put it in books, not to send it over AOL apps. John Bolton actually had a legal and personal and ethical duty, an oath, to protect this classified information. Unlike John Bolton, Julian Assange wasn't even an American citizen. He didn't owe any duties to the American government, let alone work inside the U.S. government and swear any oath to maintain the sanctity of classified information. Julian Assange had no ethical duty, had no legal duty to maintain the sanctity of classified information. Julian Assange was somebody to whom was in the role of a journalist, somebody to whom sources inside the government leaked. Now, you can say people inside the government who leaked to him, they broke the law and they should have been punished, and people who were caught and accused of being the sources for WikiLeaks, like Chelsea Manning, were convicted and did spend many years in prison. That's the John Bolton role. Though again, Chelsea Manning leaked that information because she found evidence of grave war crimes. The U.S. gunning down journalists and civilians in Iraq, the video of it, huge amounts of documents on tens of thousands of unreported deaths that the United States oversaw in Afghanistan and Iraq, and so much more. She didn't make any money from it. She wasn't looking to write a book from it. She thought that this information, she was a private in the Army, something John Bolton never was, deployed to Iraq, volunteered to fight for her country, and she saw this information and she thought it was incredibly incriminating. The American people should know, and she sent it to WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks published it. He wasn't on U.S. soil, Julian Assange. He wasn't an American citizen, had no loyalty to the U.S. government, no oath to protect classified information the way John Bolton did. And here's what John Bolton said should happen to Julian Assange. This was John Bolton in 2023 when he went on Piers Morgan.
Prison.
Well, I think that's a small amount of the sentence he actually deserves. He's committed clear criminal activity. He's no more a journalist than the chair I'm sitting on. The information that he divulged did, in fact, put many people in jeopardy. It undercut the ability of the United States to have confidential diplomatic communications, not just with other foreign governments, but in many countries with dissidents, people who, even speaking to American diplomats, could find themselves in trouble. And so, you know, he's been complaining about his treatment over the past period of time. He's the one who sought asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. Now he faces extradition to the United States. I presume he will get due process in the United Kingdom to determine whether extradition should go forward. And when he gets to the United States, he'll get due process here. And I hope he gets at least 176 years in jail for what he did.
All right, so that was, unlike Edward Snowden, whom he wanted to see hanged from a tree, an oak tree specifically. And look at what a twisted, warped mind John Bolton has. He was envisioning Edward Snowden being hanged so continuously, so intensively, that he even conjured up the kind of tree by which he wanted him hanged. And in the case of Julian Assange, he said he should be imprisoned for 176 years. Even though, again, John Bolton's case is much worse. That's why I say this is the sweetest karmic justice. You can't imagine anything better happening to a person more deserving than this. Let me ask you something, please. How much time do you spend every day on a web browser? Just think about it. How much time really do you spend on a web browser? Like clicking around, searching, scrolling through endless tabs? It's a lot, right? A lot. Like it's a lot of your day. Well, there's a new AI-powered browser from Perplexity called Comet, and it completely changes how you interact with the web. Using Comet feels like having a personal assistant living right inside your browser, one that can actually do things for you, not just give you answers, but literally click, type, scroll, and search just like you would, getting tasks done in the background while you focus on other more important things. I've been trying it out. One of the first things I did was had Comet find a restaurant that fit my schedule. It booked the reservation for me and even sent me a calendar invite to remind me while I worked on other more important things like this show. All I had to do was mention a few things to it that I was craving in terms of the food I wanted, how far I was willing to drive, and just figured out all the rest in the background without my even noticing. It can also shop for you, summarize articles, book travel, or even bulk unsubscribe you from spam. All you have to do is download Perplexity's new AI web browser, Comet, today by heading to pplx.ai/Glenn. And when you download, you'll get a free month of Rumble Premium. That's pplx.ai/Glenn. Take back your time online with Comet. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.